Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and currently of Sports Info Solutions, joined as always by Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders. Aaron, Le'VeGONE Bell and the drama is finally done. He is finished for the season. Can running backs don't matter Twitter take a win on this one?
Well, I think based on the performance of James Conner so far, I always screw up his name. I think that they probably can. Obviously, Conner has been, as efficient as a runner as Bell had been historically. And I believe he's been pretty efficient as a pass catcher too. I mean, he's like fifth or something in receiving DVOA among running backs. Obviously, there's a lot of implications to the whole Le'VeGONE Bell holdout that go past the question of whether running backs, should be paid high amounts of money. But one interesting thing I'll note is that earlier in the year, you and I were talking about what Bell might mean to Antonio Brown's performance. But it could be that Antonio Brown that him and Roethlisberger just weren't on the same page early on, because his catch rate since week 6 has gone from 53% to 71%, and receiving DVOA has gone from minus 21 to plus 34.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you in terms of that something seems to have changed about midway through the year there. And basically the way I'll approach this is if we're going to use this anecdotal piece of evidence, then running backs don't matter. Twitter, you guys can take a win on this one anecdotally. But then we'll really find out in January if the Bell-less offense can sustain itself when things get tougher. For me, and I think it kind of has to do with what you were alluding to, the underrated thing here is that the Steelers had a change in offensive coordinators this year. They're a team that really, they let their offensive coordinator run the offense. We know that Todd Haley went off to Cleveland and was in Hard Knocks and now is sitting at home with the rest of us. I think the real message here might have been that it took a while for the team to adjust to how they were going to play without Le'VeGONE Bell and with their new offense. And I think they've clearly found their balance, and it involves more Juju Smith-Schuster. It might not be proof that running backs don't matter, but that offensive coordinators matter more.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that Conner has played so well is going to cost Le'VeGONE Bell some money.
Sure. I don't think there's any doubt about it. If he had crashed and burned, then the Le'VeGONE Bell bet looks a lot better right now. Okay, on a related note, let's take one more step around and go back to Cincinnati since you're over there in Kentucky right now. Oh, we forgot to mention, we talked before we started the podcast, but we are both out of the office this week. You are in Kentucky in Lexington. What are you doing around there?
Louisville, actually. Here this is the headquarters of Edge Sports, the new overlords of Football Outsiders. So I'm here for meetings in what is sort of Cincinnati Bengals country, sort of Cincinnati Bengals country and sort of Tennessee Titans country and sort of Indianapolis Colts country. It's sort of split between the three teams all evenly. You are in a much nicer place than I am, and I mean nothing against Louisville when I say that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm so jealous of you out there. I'm over in Hawaii really roughing it this week, so just having to get by out here. It's my first time out here. I'm loving it. But you said this is one of your favorite places, right?
I love Hawaii so much. The only thing that I don't like about Hawaii is 8 a.m. football on Sunday. Other than that, Hawaii is my favorite place in the world.
I'll tell you, I was so jacked up because we flew on Saturday morning that day was just kind of a wash for me. And Sunday, I was up really early, so the 8 a.m. football was very welcome for me. We'll see when I'm still around this coming Sunday if I feel the same way.
I know that West Coast people swear by football brunch. But
okay, well, you're sort of in Cincinnati country, and Hugh Jackson also made his way back to Cincinnati this week. What's the word around there, and what's your opinion on what do we make of this?
I should have stopped Bengals fans in the Atlanta airport when I went past a flight that was going to Cincinnati, and there were a bunch of people wearing Bengals T-shirts. But I don't think we make much of this. I mean, I think that if Hugh Jackson wants to bring whatever cool offensive innovations that he brought when he was the offensive coordinator, you're not going to install that stuff in the middle of a year. I guess, he's sort of now they make him offensive coordinator again next year. I don't know. The funny thing is Marvin Lewis said something about Jackson's going to bring analytics now to Cincinnati. He wasn't exactly in favor of the analytics in Cleveland. So
that seems like an interesting take for him. So I'm curious here is, I don't know if he's brought in by Marvin Lewis or if he's brought in by the Brown family and he's just sort of tied to all different sorts of things Brown throughout his career. But I think it relates to that Steelers conversation we were just having, because there you have Todd Haley, who went to Cleveland. And now on this side of it, you have Hugh Jackson, who left Cleveland and comes back in. And I think Bill Lazor has done a really admirable job with the Cincinnati offense. I believe he came in about midway through the year last year, and towards the second half of last season and through the first part of this season, I don't think most of their issues have been on the offensive side of the ball. And I don't think he's doing it with a quarterback that has much talent to begin with. So I give him some credit for what he's done, and I wonder if this is going to be too many chefs in that offensive meeting room all of a sudden.
Too many cooks, too many cooks, too many cooks. Too many cooks, not enough Brandon Cooks. Not enough A.J. Green, honestly. That's their problem the next couple weeks.
Can we have you start singing a song for all of our transitions from segment to segment? Because we have a quick look back at last week's Get Picks coming up. Any jingles there?
No, I don't. I'm afraid I don't have any really good Dallas, Philadelphia jingles right now.
We'll have to go back and ask your brother for that. For people that don't know, Aaron's brother put together the music that we use on the Off the Charts Football podcast.
So what did you think of the Philly-Dallas game? Because I'll tell you an interesting thing about this. The yards per play was very close, and DVOA actually came out with Philadelphia a little higher than Dallas. Dallas just happened to make it happen on a couple of important plays, and, this was one of those games of inches.
It was really interesting because Dallas was the aggressive team here. They were the ones making a lot of sort of like the risky, like analytics-friendly decisions throughout the game, and we definitely have a different association of what these teams like to do in that situation. I thought it was a great job of responding kind of with their backs against the wall, but I think this division just continues to be a war of attrition, and I was curious what playoff odds has to say about who's going to win this division, or what is DVOA? What can they tell us about what to expect going forward? Is it Washington's division to lose right now?
It is Washington's division to lose. I mean, the main simulation that we do has Washington winning the division 70% of the time, and making the playoffs 75% of the time. Now, here's the thing: is that simulation doesn't penalize them for all of those offensive line injuries and Paul Richardson. And it's hard to manually adjust for every injury that every team has. Usually we only do adjustments in DVOA in the playoff odds simulation for quarterbacks and for like a couple of other top players. But then I ran another simulation where I penalized Washington a lot, made them actually the worst team in the division, worse even than the Giants, and they still won the division 60% of the time. The fact that they have this 2-game lead is huge. The fact that they have a much easier remaining schedule than Philadelphia is huge. The fact that they have a head-to-head win over Dallas is huge. I mean, right now it is their division to lose, even though they're nobody's idea of a good team.
Speaking of nobody's idea for a good team, the Packers and the Dolphins were the second game that we looked at last week. Miami continues its lack of purpose, and Aaron Rodgers finally looked healthy this week was my big takeaway. And with him looking healthy, all of a sudden the Packers are just that much of his team. Not a lot of like riveting stuff coming out of this game, but the Packers handled the Dolphins pretty easily. What did you think?
I think Miami has just completely crumbled. They've gone from 6th to 20th in DVOA in 4 weeks. It's both the offense and the defense. It's not just about Brock Osweiler. Both sides of the ball have kind of fallen apart. They have the third easiest remaining schedule, but I don't think it's going to matter very much because the Chargers are going to win a wild card, and that leaves only one wild card spot to be won in the AFC. And I just think that Baltimore or Cincinnati or whoever loses the AFC South is probably more likely to sneak in for that. And as far as Green Bay goes, it's interesting. Their rushing ranks better than their passing this year as far as DVOA goes. I mean, Aaron Jones has been pretty amazing for them, and it's hard to tell how good Aaron Rodgers is and how much he's being just held back by the offensive scheme.
Yeah, Aaron Jones has certainly been really impressive, and you know that Aaron Rodgers is calling a lot of the plays at the line of scrimmage. If he kind of turns the dial and calls just that much percent more passes, then all of a sudden the run looks that he is taking might be better looks. They might be creating that. And Aaron Jones looks like a good player. The analytics show it. The eye test shows it. So I think we ought to start believing that one. All right, and the big one for Super Bowl odds we talked about last week was the LA Rams against the Seattle Seahawks. The Rams increased their Super Bowl odds with another win. What were your big takeaways there?
Yeah, poor Seattle. Seattle is still a top 10 team in our ratings, but they're 1-5 in one-score games, including 1-4 in games that are less than a touchdown, and then also they had an 8-point loss to the LA Chargers. But they've just had terrible, in one-score games this year. They just haven't been able to make those fourth-quarter comebacks. And here, kind of same thing. And it's tough. Seattle is a good team, but they're going to need a lot of things to break their way in order to make the playoffs. And then the Rams, the Rams are one of the top teams in the league. But I think, the fact that Seattle scored so many points on them sort of points out that the Rams defense has not been what we expected. They're 20th right now. And it's not just that they can't stop the run, because even against the pass right now, the Rams defense ranks 13th. So it's not what we expected given the quality of that defensive line. Some of it's Marcus Peters' problems. Some of it is just the loss of Aqib Talib. But that team is being completely powered by offense, no differently from Kansas City or New Orleans.
Our common wisdom these days with analytics and all of the different measures that we have right now is that offense and passing are more important than rushing and defense. And we have these teams right now that look really strong, but it's not unforeseen in the world of old adages to say, here we are in November, in the middle of November, right before things really start to get cold. And these teams with great offenses like the Rams this year, the Chiefs this year, the Saints this year, those are the teams that are really impressive, that are jumping out to the big leads. In the old days, I remember growing up, you'd see a lot of these teams jump out to these big, awesome regular season, and they'd struggle in December, January, the playoffs. And I'm really curious to see as this season rolls out, if it continues to be that these teams that seem to be doing all these really sound things, that the data seems to tell us it's going to be really difficult to consistently beat teams the more teams try to employ these strategies. Is it going to be one of those teams that can see it through and kind of become more of a race to the top in terms of offenses? Or will a team that zags where everybody else zigs win with actually a better defense? Will that be the thing, the ability to differentiate with your defense? Will that be the thing that separates this year? I'm fascinated to see how that rolls out.
Yeah, I just don't think cold weather hurts offenses that much. A few years ago, I tried to put adjustments into the pass and run DVOA for weather. And I wrote a little bit about this week that, we do have an adjustment in there for indoors versus outdoors. But when I did this, I didn't find any difference late in the season between warm weather cities and cold weather cities as far as how efficient teams were. I think that what really matters is windy games. I don't think cold really changes how well teams pass the ball. So, I think that these teams that are mostly offense are going to be able to succeed in the playoffs. A lot of them also are going to play indoors, right? It's possible that the Rams will either be indoors or they'll be in Los Angeles for every game. The Saints might be indoors for every game in the playoffs, right? They're not going to have to go outside. They're not going to have to worry about that.
I'm with you. Say it's not a weather thing, though. Take a look back at when the Seahawks were really, really great. And one thing that they tried to do, and teams that are good at defense will try to do this, they'll try to shorten the game. They'll try to make it fewer plays for both teams in the game. They'll try to kind of raise the variance of which team's going to win or lose and play the game on their terms. And I'm just curious, in the age of offense, when we've kind of all agreed that offense is more important and people should be putting their resources there, and that's the thing that's more predictive and all these other different things, is it going to be one of these teams like the Rams, the Chiefs, the Saints that we think right now in November are likely to win the Super Bowl that ends up finishing the deal? Or will it be a team that has done things a little bit differently and spread their resources out a little bit more that'll end up finding a way to take it at the end of the day? I think about it more in terms of, the Seahawks are clearly, again, this year trying to play to that same game script that they were playing to a few years ago, keep the game close, win it with their defense and Russell Wilson, all that kind of stuff, bruising running back, very similar formula. It's just not working out for them. Like you said, they're 1-4 in those close games. I wonder if a team that plays to that strategy, if there's some advantage to that, especially when everybody else is doing things a different way. I don't think it's likely, though. I'm with you. I think we're probably looking at the Rams, the Chiefs.
Part of it also is there's no really great defenses this year. Chicago is very, very good, and Buffalo is pretty good. But there's no great defenses this year. So even the defenses that are bad are not really that bad. And that's why I just don't think defense is going to keep Kansas City and New Orleans and even the Rams. It's not going to keep them down. Even Atlanta, their defense is Atlanta's defense is the worst in the league right now by our numbers, but that offense could still take over. And if that defense comes back to the pack with Deion Jones back and plays, better than it has, the offense could power them into the playoffs.
I'm with you there. All right, let's take a quick break and do a quick read, and we'll be right back. The Off the Charts Football Podcast is brought to you by the Sports Info Solutions Data Hub, located at sisdatahub.com. With the SIS Data Hub, our elite team of researchers and video scouts have worked together to create a revolutionary interactive tool. The SIS Data Hub gives you countless layers of customizable filters to account for any factors imaginable. The SIS Data Hub is also the only place to view exclusive proprietary statistics, like points added, positive play percentage, and independent quarterback rating. By combining this with the ability for the user to add an unlimited number of filters based on SIS charting data, including all kinds of things like air yards, blown blocks, man-zone splits, pressure rate, fronts data, and more, the SIS Data Hub is a trusted tool for coaches, scouts, and media, and it could be yours too. Right now, for a limited time, you can get a free 1-week trial to this revolutionary database when you go to sisdatahub.com and register for an account. That's sisdatahub.com. And coming right back in, our most important games of the week for playoff odds. Aaron, what is our first big game this week?
Well, let's start with the Thursday night game, Green Bay, Seattle. Green Bay makes the playoffs in 62% of our simulations if they win this game, 28% if they lose this game. Seattle's 44% with a win, 13% with a loss. Obviously, this is a huge, huge game for the battle for the wild cards in the NFC. And teams that, as the NFL Network's ads keep pointing out, have played some pretty memorable games over the last few years. It should be a good one.
A really great one involving some replacement officials, right?
Yeah. One thing I noticed here, definitely, we talked a little earlier about Aaron Jones. There's definitely an advantage for Green Bay if they want to run the ball. They're second running the ball. Seattle is 20th in run defense. And then there's an interesting strength against strength. The Packers are by far strongest when they pass up the middle. They don't pass up the middle any more than other teams do, but they are third in DVOA on passes up the middle, and Seattle is sixth against passes up the middle, and they're the second best defense in the league against passes in the short middle of the field. Hello, Bobby Wagner. And so that's an interesting strength against strength battle. It's interesting, Seattle is much weaker against passes on the offensive left, but I looked at the charting cornerback stats, and it doesn't seem to be related to the cornerbacks playing on specific sides. I think they might be better on left side passes that are like to slot receivers and tight ends and stuff. That may be where the weakness is.
So you pointed out the matchup that I love, which I would phrase it differently, Jimmy Graham against Bobby Wagner. That, to me, is that middle field battle of strengths that you're talking about, and I'm fascinated with Jimmy Graham going back for a sort of homecoming game to see how he performs. I think that one thing when we look at Russell Wilson, he's struggled a little bit this year in a lot of his efficiency stats. Last year he was up at 13th in EPA per attempt. This year he's down to 23rd in the NFL. And you think, the pass protection's improved. Tom Cable was fired. The pressure rate goes from 34.7% down to 29.5%. The running game has been more effective for them. They were at negative 19 expected points per 100 carries last year, just negative 3 per 100 carries this year, which is actually pretty good. You look at Jimmy Graham and the season that he's having on the other side, negative 3 expected points per 100 targets last year with Seattle, 26 expected points per 100 targets this year with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. I think it's been interesting to see Russell Wilson having to play a different style this year and struggle a little bit with it. And the narrative's always been that he succeeds in spite of his supporting cast. This year, we're actually seeing some changes with that supporting cast, and it looks to me like Russell Wilson's been struggling a little bit.
I'll tell you where Seattle's going to make their yardage, though. Play action. Play action is going to be huge for them. Seattle is number 1 in the league in yards per pass on play action, 10.7 yards per play. Green Bay's defense, number 32 against play action, allowing 10.5 yards per play. That is a huge, massive advantage for the Seahawks.
Back on the other side of the ball, one thing I wanted to point out, we talked a little bit about Aaron Rodgers and his health concerns that plagued him over the beginning part of the season. On rollouts to either side this year, Rodgers' stats were very un-Aaron Rodgers-like. He was just 19 for 41 with a 46% completion rate. He has just 228 yards on 5.6 yards per attempt on rollout passes so far this year. Clearly, if you watch him, the injuries affected him. But like we said, it looks like he's turned the corner there. And in terms of interceptions, this is an interesting matchup. The Seahawks have 5 interceptions this season, tied for 23rd in the league. Rodgers has only thrown 1 interception. That could be a matchup that plays into Green Bay's strengths. I'll see if they attack a little bit more aggressively. All right, let's move forward to the next game. What do we have as the second most important game of the week?
We have Chicago and Minnesota, which is a huge game for both Super Bowl odds and playoff odds. The odds here may sound a little weird. You have to understand the Football Outsiders stats have Chicago as 4th and Minnesota as 14th, with a big gap in how these teams have performed this year. So the playoff-wise, Chicago, even if Minnesota beats Chicago, even in those simulations, we still have Chicago with higher playoff odds, 72% to 66%. But if Chicago beats Minnesota, Chicago's playoff odds go to 93%, and Minnesota's drop to 34%. So Minnesota really wants to have this game.
What is it about the numbers that makes them love Chicago so much more than Minnesota? Can you get a good sense of that?
Chicago's got the number 1 defense in the league, but they also have the number 10 offense in the league, right? Like, that seems like such a shock, but Matt Nagy has coordinated that offense. He's scheming things really good. They've played really well. They haven't just played, that Tampa game, we all thought that Tampa game was such an outlier, that maybe, whatever 6 touchdowns or whatever that Trubisky threw that day, that he wasn't going to do it the rest of the year. It turns out it was actually the earlier games of the season that were more the outliers. And then in the last few weeks, I mean, they beat Buffalo 41-9. Buffalo is one of the top defenses in the league. Obviously, their offense is awful, and a lot of Chicago's points in that game came off turnovers and short fields. But still, the Chicago offense is better than anyone gives it credit for. Then on the other hand, Minnesota, some of it is because they lost to Buffalo, but they've been kind of blah on offense. They're only 17th on offense this year. They really haven't come out and dominated people, except the Jets. They dominated the Jets.
So for my money, I think that the Bears' offensive success this year is much more attributable to who you mentioned, Matt Nagy, than it is Mitch Trubisky. I'll also give a lot of credit to the supporting cast that's come in there. They've gotten some unbelievable weapons, starting with Allen Robinson, but going 4 or 5 guys deep that they added this year that have really helped things out. Speaking of Trubisky, though, I wanted to make the argument that he might be having a little bit of an overrated season, kind of the opposite of what you were just saying. So he's 11th in expected points added per attempt, and that's a big improvement from 2017 when he was 36th. So he went from negative 16 expected points added per 100 attempts to positive 11 this year per 100 attempts. But I think it shows, if you look at his opponents, that a lot of the good stuff has come against the Bucs and the Lions, who rank 30th and 31st in pass defense by DVOA. His splits, if you remove those teams and you just look at the other teams that he's played, who average 11th in DVOA, if you combine them all, his expected point added per attempt goes to negative 0.02, so negative 2 per 100 attempts. His points earned per attempt is basically 0. His positive play rate drops from 56% all the way down to 43%. All of a sudden, the stats start to look a lot different if we strip away those 2 games. So you bring up an interesting point about when those games have occurred and which ones are the true outliers. And the fact of the matter is, right now with Mitch Trubisky, we don't know yet. My money's still on I'm not completely bought in on him, but certainly he's done more to impress me than I expected when he was coming out of North Carolina.
Well, this is one of the better defenses they faced this year. This team is 7th in defense, 10th against the pass, 4th against the run. So the Vikings, this will be one of the better defense Trubisky has faced. I mean, I just think that they've managed to, well, he himself hasn't been that great, but what they're doing with the offense is really strong. And interesting is Tariq Cohen actually leads Chicago right now with 435 receiving yards. And that's a problem for Minnesota because Minnesota is 30th in DVOA against receiving running backs this season.
Don't put Anthony Barr on him, please.
Yeah.
Please.
On the other hand, Allen Robinson may be contained because Xavier Rhodes has had a great season again, and he's helped the Vikings rank number 1 in DVOA against number 1 wide receivers.
Yep, debatably one of the best corners in the league. Flipping it around on the opposite side of the ball, Stephon Diggs back in the lineup playing for Cousins. After missing week 9 with a rib injury and having a week 10 bye, he's still 9th in the NFL in targets. Thielen, of course, is tied for first with Jarvis Landry. We saw Thielen open the season with 8 straight 100-yard receiving games. We'd never seen that before. In week 9, when Diggs was out, he had a season low in receptions, just 4, and yards, 22. I think it's a huge deal for Adam Thielen that Stephon Diggs is back on the field, help dictate those coverages. All right, let's move forward. Moving on, the final game. Which one has the most impact on Super Bowl odds? No big surprise here.
No, of course not. It's the Kansas City Chiefs at the Los Angeles Rams, actually at the Los Angeles Rams. Of course, we have Kansas City higher than the Rams. So we have Kansas City making the Super Bowl 58% of the time if they win this game, 54% if they lose. We have the Rams making it 47% of the time if they win, 41% of the time if they lose. These are the two best teams in the league by our numbers. This should be a fantastic game. As much as we both love these pass offenses, the numbers say there should be a lot of rushing yards in this game, like a lot of rushing yards in this game. The Rams are the number 1 run offense by DVOA. The Chiefs are the worst run defense. Flip it around. The Chiefs are number 4 on run offense, and the Rams are the 4th worst run defense. So either way, like as good as these passing games are, there also should just be so much spreading things out, so few men in the box, so much rushing.
So an awesome note from our researchers here on Todd Gurley. If you were watching last week, you saw him constantly running the outside zone over and over again. We actually chart 3 different zone plays. We chart inside, outside, or stretch zone. So if you throw in the outside zone and the stretch zone plays into a bucket together, that's made up 68% of Todd Gurley's runs this season, and he's averaged 11 points added per 100 attempts with a positive play rate of 49% on those runs. Meanwhile, as you alluded to, the Chiefs have really struggled in run defense, and they've especially struggled on those outside zone and stretch runs. They've conceded 15 expected points added per 100 attempts and a 56% positive play rate on outside zone and stretch runs. Both of these are way above the league averages, which is actually negative 9 expected points added per 100 possessions and 36%. So, as Bryce Rossler put it, if the Chiefs are making opposing outside runners look like Todd Gurley, what's Todd Gurley going to look like when he's actually playing against the Chiefs? We could see some scary things from both running backs in this game.
Oh, my God, seriously. When you look at the pass coverage, it's interesting. The weaknesses are opposite when it comes to types of receivers. The Chiefs have been really good against outside wide receivers, but they struggle against tight ends and running backs and other, quote-unquote, other wide receivers. So maybe
alert everybody on the Rams.
Because they all play those tight splits, I suppose. But
yeah.
I think, like, if you think about where the cornerbacks are, who's going to cover whom, Josh Reynolds alert, I guess. And then the Rams defense is more susceptible to wide receivers of all kinds, but they rank 11th against tight ends. Travis Kelce there might have to face some defense. And 2nd against running backs in the receiving game. So Kareem Hunt may be getting more of his yardage on the ground rather than outside. I'm sort of surprised that they're so good against running backs in the receiving game, because you would think that with so much pass pressure coming from the Rams, you're going to get a lot of dump-offs to the running back. But I guess they've been pretty good at defending those.
So maybe one reason for optimism for the Kansas City defense, last week they finally got back Justin Houston to complement Dee Ford, who we've talked about several times this year. In 6 weeks with Houston and Ford on the field, the Chiefs are first in the NFL in pressures per game with 16 and 3rd in the NFL in sacks per game at 3.3. That's significant because Goff's weakness is when he's under pressure. Goff, his clean pocket IQR is up at 130 and his under pressure IQR is down at 76. So the difference of 54 between his clean and under pressure IQR is the 7th largest drop-off in the league. And here's his company: Josh Allen, Joe Flacco, Mitch Trubisky, Josh Rosen, Derek Carr, and Dak Prescott. Not great. Now, here's the really interesting thing. This was similar to last year when Goff had a difference of 35 between his clean pocket and under pressure IQR, 115 and 80. In his case, his under pressure IQR remained for the first part stagnant, whereas his clean pocket IQR has gone up. So usually we're always talking about how clean pocket quarterback statistics are more consistent over time. In Goff's case, it's actually been that he's been the same guy against pressure, but he's really improved with the clean pocket this season as he's been on his, MVP contention year. So really interesting research there pulled together by our guys. And I'm really interested to see if Kansas City can start to put together more of a complementary team with both these guys on the field.
Every rule has its exception, I suppose.
For sure. Some other quick fun facts about Gurley and Hunt. Both of them 3.1 yards after contact per attempt, but broken tackle rate. So broken tackles per 100 attempts, just 10 for Gurley compared to 24 for Kareem Hunt. But rush expected points added per attempt, 11 per 100 attempts for Gurley, just 2 for Hunt. Positive play rate, again, 51% for Gurley, 44 for Hunt. But in the receiving game, the expected points added per target really flips on its head. 3 per 100 points for 100 targets for Gurley, 73 expected points added per 100 attempts to Kareem Hunt. So Kareem Hunt with those 14.7 yards per reception, leading the NFL in that category. Really what he does is he sets himself apart in the passing game.
Which is interesting because, again, the Rams have been surprisingly strong against running backs in the passing game. What happens here when strength meets strength?
All right, Aaron. On that note, we will sign off. Is there anything that you're looking to plug before we get out of here?
Just the usual, all the good stuff at Football Outsiders. Make sure that you check out Football Outsiders premium stuff at footballoutsiders.com/store. Your chance to get a lot of this good NFL charting data from Sports Info Solutions, just $40 for a year.
And definitely look out, if you're a fan of the show, on Football Outsiders. We're going to be rolling out some special Sports Info Solutions guest columns. Alex Vigderman has one coming soon. Don't miss out. That promises to be a really fascinating read as soon as we get that up there. All right, have a great weekend, and we'll be off next week for the Thanksgiving week Off the Charts podcast and we will be back the following week, and we'll miss you in the meantime.